Hello everybody, today I'm going to be going over how to do an ILS approach in the CJ4 using the working title mod. I'll be covering the approach briefing, how to set up the approach in the plane, and then how to actually fly it. I'd like to emphasize that this is just how I do it. I'm not a CFII, CFI, instrument rated, or certified to fly anything larger than a Cessna 172, so please bear that in mind. So with that said, I'll try to answer any questions in the comments, and I hope you find the video useful, or at the very least entertaining. Thanks. Alright, so first thing I'll do is go ahead and brief the approach. Today we're going to be doing the ILS to runway 2 at Glacier Park International, and I'm not going to cover everything in detail. There's other people that can explain this a lot better than me. I'll just go over the stuff we need immediately for our approach. So here we have the localizer frequency, the approach course of 020 degrees. It's a 9,000 foot runway. Touchdown zone is 2,966 feet in elevation. Here's the briefing for the missed approach. So climb straight ahead to 4,100 feet, climbing left turn to 12,000 feet, on a heading of 190 degrees to intercept the Callispal VOR on the 238 radial, and then we'll proceed to the Kili intersection indicated by 15.7 DME on this radial, and if we've not already reached 12,000 feet, we'll continue climbing to 12,000, and then we'll begin to our holding pattern over here. Here's just the communications frequencies at the airport. If we move down to the plan view, we can see we have 4 transitions. So from the west at Olibi, south at Fikib, could just go direct to the initial approach fix of Gogs, or we can start it at Scott. We're going to be starting it down here at Scott. So from Scott we're going to go to Gogs, and then Gogs to Jolik, Jolik to Hotru, Hotru to Walnu, and then Walnu down to minimums. And up here we can see dashed lines showing our missed approach, so straight ahead to 4,100 feet. Spinning around, we'll intercept this 238 radial, and head up to Kili. Moving on to our profile view, exact same information. Additionally, it gives us the glide slope, which is 3 degrees, so it's a standard glide slope. It'll put us over the threshold of the runway at 51 feet of altitude. This lightning bolt here with the cross is showing that Hotru is going to be our final approach fix. So once we reach Hotru, we'll start slowing down to the approach. In the top right here, this is just a quick reference to our missed approach briefing. So exactly the same information is up there, just in picture form. And then for minimums, since we're flying the straight in for the ILS, the minimums are the same across all categories. So it's going to be 3,166 feet on the altimeter, half a mile of visibility, and then that leaves our decision height at 200 feet. And you can just double check that our touchdown zone is 2,966 feet, and our minimums are 3,166, so exactly 200 feet above the ground. And that should be all we need to know to be able to set up the approach in the plane, so let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, so here we are coming up on our final waypoint, and as you can see, if we look at the links page, we have nothing else plotted after that. So the first thing we're going to have to do is go down to the departures arrivals page, and on the right side we have our approaches. There are no starts for this airport, so we don't have to worry about that. And for the approach, we're going to select the ILS for runway 2. And for the transition, we're going to deselect Fikib and select Scott. So if I hide that there, you can see the flight path plotted out in yellow, and it's just telling us that this is not actually executed yet. It's just a temporary flight plan. So if we hit execute, now have it as a magenta line, so the plane will now follow this route. So we can look at the legs page, and we see all the approach fixes. So that's good. Next, what we need is the navigation frequencies for the approach. And so, just by selecting this approach, if we go to the tune page, you can see it's already loaded in to the nav1 radio, the localizer frequency. However, if we lose this frequency or we have to use the radios for something else, now we need this frequency again, we can go to index, frequency, change our airport from departure to arrival. And go to this next page, and you can see ILS for runway 2. And you would just copy it by pressing this button, going back to tune, and putting it into this nav2 or nav1 radio. But for our nav2 frequency, we're actually going to be putting in the missed approach VOR. And to find it in the FMS, you can go to Index, Next, Database, and then we just type in the identifier, so Foxtrot Charlie Alpha, Enter. Now we can see the frequency is 113.2, and it also has DME associated with it, so we can measure the distance from the VOR. So we go to Tune, type in 113.2, put it into nav2. Now we have both of our nav radios set up for the approach. Additionally, if we go back to the frequency page, I will take the ATIS frequency and just put it into the standby frequency for COM1. That way, once we pass this waypoint here and are heading up to Scott, we can switch over to the ATIS, get the weather, and then type it into the performance page. And the last thing we're going to do before we start the approach is set up our displays. For the primary flight display, the PFD, I'm going to select a bearing source and select VOR2, which is our Callispal VOR. This way, as we're coming in for the approach, we have a quick reference to where the VOR is, so it'll help situational awareness as we get closer to the runway. For our MFD, I'm going to leave it in this present position mode. Instead of having just the black and blue display, I'll have the weather up. And just a few more things here. I'll keep the heading on 190 for now. If you remember from the briefing, if we have to go missed approach, it's a climbing left turn to 190 degrees. So I'll keep that in the heading for now. And so that should be all we need for now. And I'll pick this up just after we pass this Scott transition and we're heading up to GOGS. So I'll see everybody in a few minutes. Okay, so here we are approaching the GOGS intersection. Go ahead and turn the anti-ice on and start slowing the plane down to 250 knots. In the PFD here, we can see that the ghost needle has popped up now that we're close enough to our approach airfield. And this is a really nice feature, and basically what it does is if we have a localizer tuned into this radio, it will let us monitor the localizer while we're still flying using the FMS. So as we come up to this turn here, to the final approach path, we'll be able to see the localizer needles start to come alive, and then once it's pretty much aligned itself on the localizer, we'll switch over from following the FMS to following the ILS. And also we'll switch to approach once we are able to capture the glide slope. Coming to 10,000 feet, turn landing and taxi lights on as well. And one last thing to point out is I have the approach page set up, so we have our the approach of 107 and VREF of 101. So right now we're just waiting to reach the GOGS intersection. I'll pre-select the next altitude of 7,300 feet. Okay, so the FMS is ticked over. Go ahead, start descending at the 7,300. And as we do that, I'll also start bringing the plane back to about 200 knots. And we can see here that the localizer needle is active. So we can go ahead and switch from FMS to the ILS. And we can verify that it's captured the localizer up here. So here our needle is in line, so we're pretty much right on course with the ILS. And this green diamond here is centered, so that's just verifying these two are the same. And up here we have the glide slope diamond, and we're currently descending and a little bit below it. So it's kind of stationary right now, but once we capture the 7,300 feet, it should start coming down. So what I'll do is switch it to approach now, and what that does is arm the glide slope. Okay, now we're stabilized below 200 knots, waiting for the glide slope to come down. Now we should see this glide slope go from white to green here. There it goes. Just getting close to breaking through this cloud layer. See the approach lighting out there. And so this next waypoint we're coming up to is Hotru, which is our final approach fix. So once we pass that, we'll start slowing the plane to the approach. And we can already see the runway. So our minimums are not going to be an issue. We still have about, well, a few thousand feet. About a little under 3,000 feet to minimums. One thing I forgot to do now that we have the glide slope captured is get our autopilot hold altitude up to missed approach, which is 12,000 feet. Popping the speed brake out to get the plane slowed down. Drop the gear and flaps 15 to help us slow it down. just keep slowing the plane down. And we're going to take control back from the autopilot at the 500 foot callout. You can do it earlier, but I would not recommend doing it later than that, otherwise it gets pretty difficult to stabilize the plane before reaching the runway. Still letting the plane come down. Drop 35 degrees of flaps. Holding it a little bit above V approach just because we've got a bit of a tailwind now. Just waiting for the 500 foot call out.
500.
There we go, autopilot off. Turn the yaw damper off. And since we already have visual on the runway, we can either follow the PAPI lights or keep following the ILS. Looking pretty good on the center line. Glide slope. Okay, we're gonna start slowing to VREF now. And we're idle. Speed brake out, nose wheel down, and we can start braking. Okay, and as we're rolling out here, we can bring the flaps, speed brake up, get the anti-ice off. And when we turn off, we can get the lights.